Welcome to the debate. When we talk about personal metamorphosis, we almost always default to the imagery of the caterpillar and the butterfly.
Right, the classic metaphor.
Exactly. It's a very specific, quiet, and honestly isolated process. You retreat into a cocoon, you literally dissolve your old self in the dark, and you emerge transformed entirely from within. It's a deeply comforting metaphor for how we become better versions of ourselves.
It is. It's a peaceful, almost entirely passive view of profound change. We really, really like the idea that we can just sit quietly with ourselves, process our feelings, and figure it all out without the world interfering.
But there is an entirely different mechanism of growth in the natural world. If you look at the jack pine tree, its seed cones are sealed shut with this incredibly hard, impenetrable resin. Those cones can sit on a branch for decades, just completely dormant. The only way they open, the only way they release their seeds to actually grow, is if they are engulfed in a literal forest fire. They require extreme external heat, friction, and the absolute destruction of the status quo to trigger their evolution.
Okay, so we're looking at the quiet cocoon versus the raging inferno.
Exactly. Today, we are examining the mechanics of personal transformation as explored through a curated collection of 10 profoundly impactful novels. These are stories grounded in how characters navigate doubt, ambition, love, and loss to become better versions of themselves.
But the mechanisms driving their growth are entirely at odds.
Right. So we are asking this central question today. When literature acts as a catalyst for personal growth, is that transformation fundamentally achieved through an internal acceptance of our present reality? Or does true growth require the active disruption of our lives and fierce resistance to the status quo?
Honestly, it's the defining tension of the human experience, perfectly encapsulated in fiction. Do we change ourselves to fit the world, or do we force the world to change so we can grow?
I'll be taking the position that the most profound transformation is an internal journey of finding peace through radical acceptance of one's current path.
And my position is that true personal growth demands external friction, forging unexpected connections, and actively challenging societal norms.
So let's look at how this actually plays out. When I examine this collection of literature, I see a resounding argument that the most profound growth occurs when individuals just stop fighting their circumstances.
Stop fighting?
Yeah, they stop striving for an alternate reality, and instead they shift their internal perspective to find meaning in simply existing. Consider the psychological mechanics at play in Becky Chambers' novella A Psalm for the Wild Built.
I love that one.
Right? It's brilliant. We follow a wandering tea monk, Dex, and a curious robot navigating this peaceful, post-industrial world. Dex is suffering from a profound lack of purpose. They are desperately searching for external meaning, listening for some grand calling.
Waiting for the universe to give them a job.
Exactly. But the profound realization they arrive at isn't about changing the world or finding a monumental task. The mechanism of their growth is the quiet, philosophical conclusion that stepping away from the relentless biological and societal pressure to constantly achieve, recognizing that simply existing is the ultimate form of growth.
Right.
They heal by dropping the illusion that they need to do something to be valuable. And we see this mirrored in Matt Haig's The Midnight Library.
Oh, I was wondering when we'd get to Nora's Seed.
We have to. Nora's entire crisis is built on a complete lack of internal acceptance. She is literally drowning in the weight of what-ifs and crippling regret. Now, the mysterious library allows her to test out all these alternate versions of her life.
All the lives she could have lived.
Yes, she gets to change her external circumstances infinitely. She can be a glaciologist, a rock star, an Olympian, but the catalyst for her survival is the realization that changing her external reality didn't fix her internal void. The pain of existence was still there, just in different packaging. She ultimately learns that she has to actively choose to find self-worth in the messy, imperfect life she actually has. The mechanism of her transformation is purely an internal reframing.
Okay, it's a beautiful sentiment, but I come at it from a different way. Acceptance is very often a trap.
A trap?
Yes, it's a comforting illusion we sell ourselves to avoid the terrifying, messy work of actual change. I mean, real growth requires the bravery to look at your life and say, I am not fine with the way things are. Look at Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. We have Elizabeth Zott, a brilliant 1960s chemist. If she had practiced internal acceptance, she would have rationalized the rampant sexism of the scientific world.
That's a bit of an extreme example, though.
But society wanted her to accept her lot. She refuses to internally process or adapt to a fundamentally broken system. Instead, she weaponizes her expertise via a television cooking show to actively, loudly challenge social norms. The mechanism of her growth, and the growth she inspires in millions of housewives, isn't finding peace with reality.
Right.
It's introducing massive friction into the homes of viewers, inspiring women everywhere to rethink their ambitions. That isn't acceptance. That is defiance.
I see why you frame it as defiance, but defiance requires an incredible amount of energy, and it very often masks deep, unresolved internal pain. You can fight the world all you want, but if your internal landscape is a mess, the external victories ring hollow.
I hear that, but how often is that internal reframing genuinely sparked in isolation? You're arguing for the cocoon, but I would argue that profound internal shifts almost never happen without an external sledgehammer hitting the cocoon first.
A sledgehammer?
Yes. Take Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honneman. Eleanor lives a highly rigid, meticulously controlled, isolated life. And she is convinced, absolutely convinced, that she has achieved exactly the internal acceptance you are talking about.
Right, her whole mantra is that she's fine.
Exactly. Her internal narrative is, I am perfectly fine, but she isn't fine. She is deeply traumatized and profoundly lonely. Her internal processing was entirely insufficient to heal her because it was just a defense mechanism disguised as acceptance.
But she eventually does the internal work.
Only because she was forced to. Her life only transforms because Raymond, the IT guy from her office, unexpectedly and persistently intrudes on her isolation. He forcefully unravels the emotional walls she built through messy, unpredictable external intervention. Growth wasn't a solo internal revelation for Eleanor. If left to her own devices, her internal acceptance would have literally killed her.
Wow.
It required the friction of another human being refusing to let her hide.
Okay, let's pull on that thread, specifically regarding how we deal with the past. Because in almost all of these narratives, the past is the anchor holding the characters back from becoming who they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
I see why you think external intervention, this forcing mechanism, is the key. But I'd argue that true personal evolution requires a quiet, reflective, emotional closure with the past, entirely divorced from attempting to change present material conditions.
Oh, you're steering us straight toward Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi.
I absolutely am, because it perfectly illustrates the psychological mechanics of internal perspective. In this small Tokyo cafe, time travel is possible, but the author imposes strict, almost suffocating rules on the magic.
Very strict.
The most important rule? No matter what you do in the past, no matter who you talk to or what you say, it absolutely cannot change the present.
Which logically makes the time travel completely useless from an external material standpoint. You can't save the person who died. You can't stop the lover from moving away.
Materially useless, yes, but psychologically, it is brilliant. By removing the character's ability to fix their present circumstances by altering the past, the narrative traps them in a state of pure emotional processing.
Right. They can't change the facts.
Exactly. They can't use the magic as a loophole to avoid their grief. The time traveler is forced to realize that the external reality isn't the problem that needs solving. It is their internal framing of that reality, the unsaid words, the lingering guilt, the lack of forgiveness that is suffocating them.
Yeah, but
They go back, they have the conversation, they return to an identical present, but they are fundamentally changed. Understanding the past becomes the mechanism for reshaping how they live today without changing a single atom of their material world. It is the ultimate testament to the power of internal acceptance rewiring the human brain.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that as the primary driver of growth. And let me tell you why. Looking backward, even just to shift your emotional perspective, is inherently passive.
Passive?
Yes, it's sitting in a cafe, sipping a cup of coffee, and making peace with ghosts. But growth, actual transformative flesh and blood human growth, is a forward-facing, active struggle. It isn't about finding a quiet corner to make peace with what you've lost. It is about violently colliding with the future and building something new.
Violently colliding? You make human connection sound incredibly aggressive.
Because life demands friction. Consider Gabrielle Zevins' Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. This novel spans decades of a deeply complicated partnership between two video game designers, Sam and Sadie.
Oh, they are messy.
So messy. And their growth is absolutely not achieved by sitting quietly and reflecting on their past mistakes. It is forged in the fires of ambition, creative rivalry, catastrophic failure, and profound grief. They don't process their pain in a quiet room. They process it by building entire digital worlds to scream at each other, to challenge each other, to reach out when they can't find the words in the real world.
But wait, isn't their constant striving and their inability to just accept each other exactly what causes their deepest fractures? I mean, their ambition almost destroys them.
Yes, it causes fractures, but the friction of that ambition is also the only thing that heals them. The mechanism of their growth relies entirely on the tension between two brilliant, flawed people over decades. Game design itself is a perfect metaphor here. You can't have a game without resistance, without rules, without obstacles.
Well, sure.
Growth is playing the game of life against a worthy opponent. They don't find peace by accepting their limitations or making peace with ghosts. They find meaning by pushing past their limits, failing spectacularly, and being forced to try again by the sheer presence of the other person. Growth is the friction of moving forward.
That brings us to a fascinating point about who is in the room with us when we are trying to grow. And I want to offer an analogy here. Think about tuning an instrument before a performance.
Okay, I'm with you.
If the internal perspective isn't aligned, if the strings of your own mind are too tight with anxiety or too loose with despair, exactly as we saw with Nora in the Midnight Library, then no amount of external connection will create harmony. You will only produce dissonance, no matter who you are playing with or how actively you are engaging with the world. You need quiet, solitary introspection to hear the true pitch of your own soul.
But you can't tune an instrument in a vacuum. You literally have to create friction. You have to drag the bow violently across the strings to actually hear the pitch. Without that friction, the instrument is just a silent piece of wood with potential.
I'm not arguing for a vacuum. I'm arguing for intentional distance. You need enough quiet to hear the note resonate without the noise of the orchestra drowning it out. We see this beautifully illustrated in the Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa.
Such a tearjerker.
It really is. We follow Satoru and his perceptive stray cat Nana on a quiet road trip across Japan. The mechanism for Satoru's profound grace in the face of his own mortality isn't hammered out in conflict. It is the very distance from the chaos of daily life, the slow, rhythmic momentum of the isolation inside the car cab that allows his memories to gently unfold.
But he is engaging with people on that trip. He's visiting old friends. He isn't totally isolated.
True, he visits them, but he engages on his own terms, from a place of deep internal stillness. He doesn't go to them to fix his problems, he goes to them to quietly conclude his journey. And similarly, consider Shelby Van Pelt's Remarkably Bright Creatures.
With Marcellus the octopus.
Yes. We have multiple characters drowning in grief and loneliness, but the hidden truths of their lives are uncovered through the incredibly perceptive yet physically separated perspective of Marcellus, an octopus in an aquarium. Marcellus doesn't force a chaotic confrontation. He is behind glass. He nudges, he offers a gentle, almost silent observation that allows Toba to slowly reach her own internal alignment. The instrument must be tuned in quiet before it can join the orchestra.
I appreciate the elegance of the tuning analogy, I really do. But I argue that profound empathy, the kind that fundamentally breaks and remakes who we are, is almost never arrived at through quiet observation or gentle nudges.
No.
No. It is forced upon us by chaotic, unavoidable human intersection. When we talk about dragging the bow across the strings, I'm talking about situations where you have no choice but to hear the noise.
Give me an example.
Look at Frederick Backman's Anxious People. Talk about chaotic external disruption. We have a bank robbery that goes disastrously wrong, resulting in an apartment full of complete strangers being taken hostage. They are physically trapped together. They cannot retreat to their quiet corners to tune their instruments.
It is a pressure cooker.
Exactly. And what is the psychological mechanism of growth there? These are isolated, anxious people who have spent years completely unable to fix their internal landscapes. But when they are trapped together, the polite fictions of "I'm fine" are entirely stripped away. They are forced to see each other's mess.
Oh yeah, the bystander effect just dissolves.
Right. The fear, the loneliness, the marital failures, it all comes spilling out because the external crisis shattered their internal narratives. Empathy wasn't cultivated in a quiet garden for these people. It was hammered out in a crisis. Compassion was forced upon them by proximity, and it changed how they saw themselves.
I hear that, but a crisis is a temporary state. When the hostage situation ends, the police let them go, and they still have to go home and do the actual internal work of living with their new perspective.
But they never would have started the work without the crisis demanding it. And we see this exact same forced proximity acting as a catalyst in fantasy, too. Look at The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. Linus Baker, the protagonist, is a government worker who is the absolute embodiment of your internal acceptance.
Oh, Linus.
He has completely accepted his lonely, bureaucratic, gray life. He's convinced himself that following the rules is the same as being fulfilled.
He has heavily regulated his own expectations to avoid disappointment.
Right, which is a defense mechanism disguised as peace. His entire worldview is only dismantled when his external reality is forcibly disrupted. He is assigned to inspect an orphanage of magical children. These children, who are loud, chaotic, and considered dangerous by society, force him out of his internal quiet.
They certainly do.
They demand that he engage with the vibrant, unpredictable reality of caring deeply for others. His prejudice and his fear aren't defeated by quiet reflection. They're defeated by the unavoidable friction of lived experience. He grows because the external world simply wouldn't let him stay small.
I will concede that there is a profound, undeniable power in that kind of external forcing mechanism. When we look back at Elizabeth Zott in Lessons in Chemistry, I cannot deny that her brand of social rebellion is undeniably transformative, not just for herself, but for the societal structure around her.
Yeah.
There are times when the internal tuning is finished, and the only way to grow is to take a sledgehammer to the concert hall itself, because the acoustics are fundamentally unjust. Sometimes the environment is the sickness.
I appreciate that. And I, in turn, completely validate your perspective regarding the exhaustion of modern existence. When we look at Dex, the wandering tea monk in A Psalm for the Wild-Built, their quiet gratitude and the radical act of simply stopping is incredibly resonant.
It really is.
In a world that constantly demands we produce, disrupt, and strive, finding a quiet corner to just be without justification is a deeply necessary form of burnout recovery. Sometimes the external friction is exactly what broke us in the first place, and the cocoon is the only place to heal.
Exactly. Though I maintain my substantive disagreement on what constitutes the primary driver of lasting growth. The sledgehammer might break the unjust system, and the friction might spark the fire, but it is the quiet internal realization of one's own worth that allows a person to actually survive the falling debris. The external world is entirely outside of our control. Our internal landscape is the only territory we can ever truly master.
And I maintain that believing we can master our internal landscape without testing it against the unpredictable chaos of other human beings is an illusion. We only really know who we are when we collide with who we are not.
Well, this has been a truly illuminating exchange. If we are to synthesize our discourse today, we find ourselves suspended in the tension between the quiet, internal shift of accepting what is and the loud, external friction of fiercely challenging what is.
Yes, it's the eternal tension between making peace with our regrets, like the travelers in the Tokyo Cafe, and using our friction and anger to forge an entirely new reality, like the game designers in Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow.
Yet, in examining these 10 extraordinary narratives, we do find undeniable points of convergence. Whether the catalyst for change is an alternate life library that literalizes our exhaustion with infinite choice, a chaotic bank robbery that violently forces empathy upon strangers, or a quiet, perceptive distance maintained by an octopus in an aquarium, true transformation always requires the exact same currency:
Vulnerability. It always comes down to the shedding of our carefully constructed emotional armor. Whether you take that armor off slowly, piece by piece, in a quiet room, or have it ripped away by a sudden, chaotic collision with another person, the result is the same: a raw, exposed self that is finally capable of absorbing change.
It is remarkable how engaging with these diverse fictional frameworks deepens our understanding of our own psychological mechanics. Storytelling isn't just an escape from reality. It is a laboratory where we safely experiment with the mechanics of becoming. And the source material here, these 10 specific worlds crafted by brilliant authors, holds even more layers regarding how narratives influence our actual lived personal growth. There is so much more to explore in how the psychology of fiction shapes the reality of the reader.
Which means, as always, we will leave the final conclusion to the listener.
We do not declare a victor here. We only offer the perspectives to illuminate the path. So, we return to the forest and the chrysalis. Are you the jackpine seed waiting for the intense, external fire of life's friction to crack your shell and force you to take root? Or are you the caterpillar, requiring a quiet, internal dissolution to build your wings in the dark? Whichever mechanism of becoming resonates most deeply with your own journey, we thank you for exploring the complexities of growth with us. Until next time.